How about that? Getting started in just a sec. How about that? Just a second here. Boom, and there we go. Greetings all. Welcome back. What is truth? Boy, oh boy. The old today's topsy-turvy old world. Pretty hard to, kind of wade through all the BS that's out there. So we're gonna, really, it's quite simple to when you want to get down to where your answers come from and where your how you can find out the truth is largely through logic, which is also kind of a way to get to the truth. Also true. What is truth? That conforms to the mind of God. Is truth relative? Well, we'll look at all these different things. Look at all these different things. Hi Nick, how you doing? All is well where you're at. Having your lunch break, Nick. And it's like 10 o'clock at night for me. So what does Merriam-Webster think about truth, right? It's the quote from the Bible, and you watch the Bible mini-series, and Jesus asked Pilate, or Pilate asked Jesus, what is truth? And that is the world. The world doesn't really know what truth is, or they want to deny the truth. Or the one today is people argue whether or not truth is relative. And there are those out there and entire philosophies like Hinduism and Buddhism out there that do not believe in absolute truth. Which the statement is, are you absolutely sure about that? Right? It's a logical fallacy. But it's quite popular because it's very easy. When you say something like a great example is, is it right to murder babies in the womb? Well, if it saves the life of the mother, it's like, well, no, that's not the question. The question is it right to murder an innocent child in the womb? Objectively, no, it's not. Right? And then, well, what if saves the life of the mother? And what about this? And what if they can't pay for him? And what about, it doesn't really matter. All of that other stuff, that the philosophical arguments and the things that people want to go into on that is all subjective nonsense. And you can deny the truth, and most people do. Okay, most people do deny truth, and they go off on all these rabbit trails and say, "Well, it's gray." There's a specific reason to people who saw my little poll up there that I said, "What is truth? Is it black, or is not is it black and white or gray? Is it black? Is it white, or is it gray?" Right? And there was a few answers that were on there for gray, but nobody picked black. Good. All truth is good. All truth. Even if it's an uncomfortable or a bad truth or whatever, because it's true. Okay? Even if it's something bad you don't want to hear about. Let's say Jeffrey Dahmer. Okay? Jeffrey Dahmer did a whole bunch of bad stuff. That's true. But if the guy is your neighbor, you'd want to know that, right? You'd want to know those truths. You don't want to just kind of not worry about it or not care. You want to know those things because they could affect you. Some people will be like, "Oh, don't tell me, that's just so horrible and so whatever." It's like, well, yes, but the truth can be dark. The truth can be bad. But most of the time the truth that is on the negative side is a positive thing, a more positive thing than a reinforcing truth, because it allows people to grow and examine things and learn more about themselves, become more mature in their attitudes and in their perspective, and learn how logic works instead of playing around in this world nonsense where everyone's afraid of cooties, right? And they think that lockdowns are a good thing to keep them safe and all that, You got to apply the bit of the truth stuff to it. So Nick says, or that is my truth. Correct. That is where you have moral relativism and where you have the idea that truth is relative. What's true for me may not be true for you. And it's like, no, because you're a psychopath. You have mental issues and mental problems. And the people that are in America right now, a good deal of them are mental problems. And it's unfortunate. And it's at the point where, you know, the people who want to go into these government psyops that are just so blatant, and they're not even trying, right? They're not even trying hard to fool people. They kind of just deserve it because they want to be deceived that bad. You have to want to be deceived that bad. And sometimes it's a more comfortable life, right? Not knowing and just living your life in complete ignorance and choosing to disbelieve anything that is uncomfortable, regardless if it's true. And, you know, I mean, I guess to each their own, but I certainly wouldn't want to be that way. I certainly would not want to be that way. So I brought up a few pages, and I think I've come from, what is this one? gotquestions.org. They have both angles of it. So truth, according to Merriam-Webster, the body of real things, events, and facts. Actuality, what it exists in real life. The state of being, case, and fact. Judgment, proposition, or idea that is true or accepted as true. I don't, you know, accepted as true is kind of pushing it. Now you're into the relativism. Is it true or is it not? People who believe in moral relativism, I go, is moral relativism true? All they can do is go, I don't know. Looks like it's true. So like true false questions don't exist. On and off. No, absolute truth is truth. Truth is absolute. It's all it comes down to. We're going to look at logic. I'm a big fan of logic because you can't get to truth without logic. Science that deals with principles and criteria of validity of inference and demonstration. The science of formal principles of reasoning. It's a very complicated way of saying, how would, you know, what is it? I want to say, logic oftentimes is just, it is what it is. You know, like, look at, like, dare I bring up flat earth or anything, but it's like, yeah, it's logically goes this way because all of my senses agree with that position. Right? If I jump off the roof of a building, it's going to hurt when I get to the ground. You know, it's logic. Formulation of arguments and things like that is where you get into these subjective ideas, they call it, where you're no longer dealing in absolute truths. You're dealing with how people feel about things. And when people argue moral relativism and they argue, well, it's okay to kill babies if it's for the mother, that's a totally a relativistic approach. That is a nihilist approach where the person is their own God and they believe that their feelings or their rationale in their head trumps truth and logic. It doesn't. It doesn't. Unless you ask a liberal, of course. What is black and white thinking? I'm a big fan of black and white thinking. You know, I may not always, I might, you know, consider and go with gray areas as a lot of people do. You know, we're living in the world. But I understand what the right way, and I understand what's good and what's bad. Right? I understand it. But everybody's a sinner. And everyone falls into gray. Nothing can be absolutely 100% perfect as long as we're living in the world. But if you have to make a judgment call on something, it should be pretty straightforward. Should be pretty straightforward. Human beings have a strong need to categorize everything. This is not fault, but rather an asset. Without our ability to take isolated instances, gather together in groups, and then make generalizations, sweeping generalizations, by the way. I make sweeping generalizations. We wouldn't have math, language, or even the ability for coherent thought. Well, you wouldn't have any of that without God. Without an ability to generalize from the specific to the abstract, you wouldn't be able to read and understand this right now. Well, you can tell where these guys are coming from, and in the Learn Religions page, obviously not very religious people. They don't even believe in the human spirit. One of the ways this can occur is when we go too far in limiting our categories. See, you got to have an open mind. How many times have you heard that? You got to have an open mind. I don't know, maybe murdering babies isn't so bad all the time. I mean, there's got to be some times where it's okay. Um, Naturally, our categories cannot be infinite, but we cannot, for example, place every object and every concept into its own unique category, unrelated to everything, and blah, blah, blah. When this latter situation occurs, it's commonly referred to as black and white thinking. It is called this because of the tendency of the two categories. So they start off in saying, well, we have to take everything and put them all into little boxes, right? And then jumble them all up and then pull from this box. And I like stuff from this box and making my decisions in this box. And then I'm going to decide, what the truth is. And it's like, right, you're just making up the truth as you go along from all these little different boxes. And then they're saying that if their statement here is, when the latter I'll read the last sentence. At the same time, we also cannot try to place absolutely everything into one or two completely undifferentiated categories, right? Like right and wrong and good and evil. Technically, this can be considered a type of false dichotomy. So they're saying it's a false dichotomy when you regard something as either true or you regard something as false. The false dichotomy is what they're trying to explain. What they're saying is a false dichotomy. Yes and no is a polar opposite. You can put those into two specific categories, right? And to saying that that's not true is a fallacy. This is an informal fallacy which occurs when we are given only two choices in an argument and required to pick one. So they're saying anytime you have a choice of A or B or an ultimatum, and you're looking at it in black or white, that's a fallacy of some sort. Someone asks you what your birth date is, or tells you what your birth date is, and asks you if that's a right date or not. It's a yes or no question, right? We're going to choose some more stuff. We're going to choose, well, I don't know when God created my spirit. We're going to play one of those games. That is despite a reality that there are multiple options which have not been given due consideration. There's multiple options. See, this is where these freaks out there that they hate truth. They hate God. That's what it comes down to. And this is, of course, Unlearned Religions, where you have an atheist writing about Eastern Asian, Abrahamic, Indian, and other beliefs or something, right? Who just doesn't like the fact that people have morals. Absolutely drives them nuts. And they go, well, you can't believe in black and white, right and wrong. Well, according to you, that's a bad thing to do. According to you and your little God, I'm the God of my own universe. The fallacy of black and white thinking. We all fall victim to black and white thinking. Yes, and a true-false question answer, or a yes or no question. Must have mistakenly reduced an entire spectrum of possibilities down to the two most extreme options. That would be logically what you do. Each is the polar opposite of one another without any shades of gray in between. Often those categories are of our own creation. We attempt to force the world to conform to our preconceptions about what it should look like. No, it's the opposite. Right and wrong is a thing. Yes and no is a thing that exists and that is true. When you try to include all of these other variations, it's you taking your subjective opinions about things and pretending that they're facts. And everybody is an expert at that. And apparently throughout the entire history of the world, everybody has been an expert at doing that. Black and white and controversial issues. There are black and white thinking is a live issue, a life issue, is a genuine problem in debates and topics like politics, religion, philosophy, and ethics. No, it's not a problem. It's only a problem for people who refuse to accept truth. That's the only place that there's a problem. In these, black and white thinking is like an infection. You people who believe in absolute truth. It reduces the terms of discussion unnecessarily and eliminates an entire range of possibilities and ideas. Yeah, like Star Trek, right? We can just go off into fantasy land, like dark matter. A entire range of possibilities. Oh, the Earth can't be flat. No, there's space magnetism and vacuum, and we went to the moon and played golf, and we brought our dune buggy with us. Quite often, it also demonizes others implicitly by categorizing them in the black, the evil, that we are supposed to avoid, which is exactly what the Bible tells us to do. Mark and avoid, right? So these guys have a little war on God when they have a war on truth, don't they? What is Jesus? The way, the truth. Our view of the world. The basic attitude which lies behind black and white thinking can often play a role with other issues as well. This is particularly true in how we evaluate the state of our lives. Yeah. People are pretty relativistic when they look at themselves. When someone says, hey, you should probably stop doing that. You're wasting a lot of time playing video games, and, you probably should find a job, and maybe move out of mom's basement. Maybe. People can be very relativistic. For example, people who experience depression, even in mild forms, commonly view the world in black and white. They categorize experiences and events in extreme terminology that fits in their generally negative perspective on life. Right, these are people, these depressed people are people who see a glimpse of what the world actually is, and they don't want to deal with it. Because the world's pretty messed up. This is not to say that everyone who engages in black and white thinking is depressed or necessarily suffering or negative. Instead, the point is simply to note that there is a common pattern to such thinking. It can be seen in the context of depression as well as the context of flawed arguments. So it's saying if you believe in yes or no or true and false, you are a depressed, mentally ill person with flawed thinking. That's what they're saying. Problem involves the attitude one takes with respect of the world around us. No, it's not an attitude. Your absolute truths and your logic and your facts have nothing to do with how you feel about them. Nothing. What's often is relativistic is how we choose to deal with the truth or the falsehoods. That's where the relativistic comes into it. You can understand the truth and go, yeah, okay. Well, this is how I have to deal with it because of this or because of that, whatever the situation is. But you still know the difference between right and wrong. Still know the truth. We often insist that it conform to our preconceptions rather than adjusting our thinking to accept the world as what it is. Well, the world is a cesspool of lies and misdirection and thievery and all of the terrible things you could possibly imagine. So it's like you take your godly thinking and your logic and you just become part of the world. You just... Killing babies is okay sometimes. It's okay sometimes. Nonsense. Truth is not absolute. This looks like a pretty big one. Moral ambiguity. Let's go into the definition of moral ambiguity so we can think about this as we read these atheists tell all about truth not existing. Moral ambiguity is a lack of certainty about whether something is right or wrong. Is that like the motto of the United States? Or just pretend you didn't know? Pretend that the stuff isn't written on your heart? Is that what that comes from? We're going to get into the non-absolute truth-believing people. Maybe. What are we going to do? I don't want to spend all night here, so maybe I'll do the Got Questions one. Psychology Today. Oh, this is going to be a funny one. Oh, it's a big, long article, though. The psychologists are the hilarious ones because they make their entire paycheck on everything being relative. Because they just sit there and listen, and they never actually give you an answer, and they never actually fix anything for people. Everything can be relative, and how do you feel about this, and how do you feel about that, and it's all a waste of time. We'll take a look at what we got going on in chat here for a second. Apparently, when I do my little program stream, I am ahead of the game by like a minute or something when I'm talking compared to when you hear it. Oh, let's see. Show me the truth. We got Frank here, Bacon Toast here. Hey. Bacon Toast, the world is a hellhole. Yeah, Smashing Pumpkins. And it's a vampire too. Bacon Toast, a lot of psychologists also think that man is good by nature. Well, that's a difficult question. It all depends on it's a subjective one because it all depends on your definition of good. As a Christian, though, we know the definition of good, and no man is good, no, not one, save for Jesus Christ. So, no. Now, when you talk about if people are inherently evil, that's maybe a little bit different thing. I don't believe people are inherently evil. They're inherently sinful, though. And the longer that you're in sin and the more susceptible to sin you are, the greater evil you can become and the greater evil you can manifest. But no, nobody's good. No, not one. And that is the truth. The absolute truth about that. Does truth still exist? Boy, we're having a discussion about whether or not truth even exists anymore. Shows how much these brain doctor guys know, huh? Or are there just alternative facts? Alternative facts. Oh, I know. Alternative facts are like when, the CDC says that everybody needs to take a test to make sure they don't have cooties. That's a fact. And then you have the fact of the guy who made the test who says that his test doesn't test for cooties. His test doesn't test for anybody being sick with anything. It just says whether or not you've been exposed to something or not. Okay? Which set of facts are we going for? Sounds to me like somebody is lying. But not according to PhD David B. Fellman, who doesn't know what truth is. Does anybody want this guy as their doctor? He doesn't understand truth. Let's see. This is all about a big long Trump story, so we'll skip that. Trump supporter. So the Trump supporter believed in right and wrong, and he didn't like that. Our social and technological environment has radically shifted in just the last decade or two. However, these criteria are beginning to fail us. For one thing, the amount of information possessed by our species, has gotten exponentially greater. You think so? The amount of information has gotten greater? I guess it depends on what you classify information at. There's more garbage. But I think by and large, the true stuff is still true. There's a lot of garbage, though. You find out that all of those things that happened in history and all these things that were the great monumentous achievements, they didn't go down the way that they said they did. So does that actually count as information? I suppose. Information. Junk. And it's now possible to use seeing something as a viable criterion for believing it. It's increasingly important that we believe things that we cannot directly see. It's increasingly important we believe things we cannot directly see. Well, it isn't increasingly important that you do that, no. Take climate change, for instance. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. How do you answer that one? Yeah, the climate changes. Yep, sure does. And then they leave you down to the path of, well, climate change is going to kill all of us, or the climate change is going to kill the planet, and it's all people's fault. And we need to end meat, and we need to GMO crops, and we need to do all this other stuff on the inference that climate change is something that exists. Most of us cannot directly observe emissions destroying the ozone layer. Okay, we'll take a look at this. First, you have to understand now, this is how we're going to use logic and talk about climate change. First, you have to prove that there is an ozone layer that you can demonstrate and test and all that stuff. That would require you to see it. That would require you to witness it. That would require it to be there. And you have to demonstrate that to people. Then you would have to demonstrate that emissions from cars or whatever you want to use is actually negatively impacting this fantasy layer. Okay? And if it does, then you have to show that it does that it actually does this where the ozone layer would be a couple 100,000 feet up. You have to prove all of these things logically. You can't just take that as yes or no. I mean, it's like this is a statement, a subjective statement of somebody's opinion about something, but is there any facts to back it up? And are they facts? Oh, there's the hairspray is killing the ozone layer. That's what I got taught when I was a kid. It's a hairspray. It's the hairspray. What is it today? Mouth breathers. Mouth breathers are the problem. Mouth breathers, too much CO2, and we need to make sure they get gene therapy, which I'm not 100% against after all this time now, but that's the thing. CO2 is now what's harming the ozone layer and causing all these weather problems that nobody has managed to prove that exist. Okay. I'll probably have the little fact checker thing on my video now. Get the fact checker in there. So anyways, now here's where we come in with logic about this. All right. Now, I don't know about the hairspray being bad for the ozone layer. We'll pretend the ozone layer exists. Sure. We'll say the hairspray kills the ozone. Bro, don't make hairspray anymore. Fine. But then when you say CO2 kills the ozone layer, and it's like, science, your ozone layer comes from CO2. All of the plants would die without any CO2. Everything in the planet is made by carbon. Okay? It's complete, logically retarded. Complete logic, nonsense, gobbledygook. And people love it. Tell the lie big enough and long enough, people are more likely to believe it than a little tiny lie. Most of us cannot directly see the polar ice caps slowly melting. Nobody can because nobody's allowed to go there. Huh. Or take people's word for it who cannot logically prove any of this stuff. In fact, in the realm of science in general, seeing is believing. Okay, it's impossible for most of us without access to a research lab. See again. It's so complicated that you can't make any logical heads or tail of it because you're too stupid. I went to school. I went to school and learned how to lie really good. I went to school and I believe everything the government tells me. Get your shot. Okay, so we know where Psychology Today, you know why he's asking the question, does truth still exist? Because he doesn't know what it is anymore. And that's the situation, the sad situation that people that have lost God, never found God, don't know who God is, and were kind of chewed up and spit out by the world, and then, fluoridated up and all these other things, as well as their own personal choices and all the mind control and all that stuff. People don't know what truth is anymore, nor do they care. They understand that if you go against what everyone else is doing, it's more difficult, and it's a lot easier to eat donuts and watch Netflix than it is to actually go out and say, hey, that's not right. That's not right. Is truth relative? We'll find out. What we got over here in chat? Everyone behaving? Frank says, think about the 80s and the amount of hairspray that was used. Yeah, I mean, it's all the old, it was all the baby boomers and the older Gen Xers that messed the ozone layer up. Yeah. The South Pole is melting or whatever they say, right? Of course, you can't go there and check. No one from any country in the world, all the countries signed a thing that says you can't go to Antarctica. I wonder why. Well, it could be because there is no South Pole. Because there is no South Pole. Don't need to be breathing CO2 with a ritualistic shame-house. Absolutely, now you're onto it. See, the way to prevent global warming is for everyone to have the muzzle. You got to have the muzzle on so you can eat your own CO2. That's brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. 2 Corinthians 5:7, for we walk by faith, but not by sight. Well, we walk by faith. That is an interesting thing. Is like, as far as Christianity goes, yeah, it's faith-based, but you can tell it's true by inference and by, because it's all like a nice, you'd say spirituality, but it's like magic. As you like, okay, you've got a creator. Who is it? You got a book that tells the truth about everything and exactly how everything goes without any errors in it. It's like, okay, that's the guy. Okay. And it's by faith that you're doing that. It is, because you can't really say, you can't say it's a fact because you weren't there. You can prove it by inference. But that's why they call it faith. And that's why it's considered a religious belief. It's a belief. A lot of evidence. You know, it's like, I actually, with the earth being flat, I can, you can actually prove the earth is flat, but you can kind of say that it's a belief, but you can prove it. Believing in a globe, however, and a heliocentric model of everything zing, 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 spinning around the universe, that's 100% religion belief. So is evolution. 100%. Bacon toast psychiatrist ruined my mom's life with pseudoscience nonsense and putting her on drugs she didn't need. Yeah, that's their job. That's how psychiatrists make their living, is you get there with a couple of minor issues and then they put you on drugs and make you a drug addict, and then you have a whole bunch more issues. But then you have to keep going back to the doctor. You see, the thing is, the medical industry is a sham if you never get better. You've been going to the doctor for these chronic illnesses that you've had for years, and he keeps giving you more pills. You need to fire the doctor, if not sue the doctor. Why should the doctor get paid if he is not fixing your problem? Right? There are actually countries apparently out there where their medical system works like that, where they only get paid if they fix you. Sounds like the way to go for me. Speaking of that, yeah, my mom, she went to a psychiatrist for a long time and she never got her stuff figured out either. But I was a couple years into knowing they were all just full of crap. And she wanted me to go to her psychiatrist. She was going to die, I mean, she's got pancreatic cancer. She's only got a couple of months, and I'm like, if it will make you happy, I'll go, but I'm just going to tell you, I don't believe anything they say, and I think they're all a bunch of liars. And I got to tell the guy to his face where he was an absolute liar, and I liked it. It's like, look, you don't want to bring me into situations like that. You don't want to introduce me to your pediatrician sister. You don't. You don't. Because I don't have to be nice to anybody. God's taking care of me just fine. Where, hey, I don't give a crap what somebody's pediatrician sister thinks about me. I don't. I'm going to say, yeah, how many kids did you murder? How many kids do you poking full of vaccines and all this stuff? You're like, of course I'm not that hard. But I'm like, I would be something like, so do you give kids a lot of vaccines these days? And of course the answer is, oh yeah, we have a few dozen that, we got all these different things and they're adding them every year. And you're like, so it doesn't bother you to hurt little kids? Oh, well, it's for their protection. And you go, well, so none of them are hurt after you've been doing that. And it's like, well, you've got some, that you don't know if it's the shot or for something. It's like, yeah. So you're evil. You know that it causes problems. Okay. Right and wrong, black and white, you're evil. People don't like to hear that. Oh, not my fault. I didn't pick the profession. Like these places who say you got to get shot up with juice to go be a nurse and take care of people. I ain't telling people to do that. I mean, even being a manager or something like that who is bringing down the law on their, $12 an hour employees, that they need to get some life-threatening experimental crap put into them, or they're going to lose their job. Whoever those managers are, they got some karma coming. But they probably, truth is relative. Truth is relative. We won't examine anything too closely, and then I can claim naivete. I can claim ignorance. Because your conscience is seared with a hot iron. And, it's probably, I've been wise to things like fluoride for 10 years now, right? So I have no idea the kind of soup, malaise, milk that people are wading through in life when they've got all these things that they're doing that they're maybe not aware of. But there's a lot of things that people do that they are very aware of. I mean, Amerika, for instance, is like 70% overweight, with around 50% of people morbidly obese. That means that you're more than 50 pounds overweight. Or 30 pounds. Yeah, obesity, 30. You're more than 30 pounds overweight. And it's like, yeah, that's going to mess with your head. I mean, how well do you expect to function? And we're off into all of these different things, but, this comes down to where people won't accept making those decisions like what is right and wrong, what is truth, what is falsehood, and then they cede their brains over to the experts and the unnamed scientists and the psychologists. And then they end up wearing muzzles and complaining about it. And it's like, well, you asked for it. You asked for it. So we're going to talk about, is truth relative? No, it isn't. What a dumb statement. What a dumb question. And people ask, there are no dumb questions. It's like, yeah, that's a pretty dumb question. How can truth be true if it's relative? There's no such thing as absolute truth. Are you absolutely sure? Well, if you're not sure, because it's relative, then the statement's true. When someone says truth is relative, he normally means that there is no absolute truth. What else would they mean? Some things may appear to be true to you, but not true to me. If you believe in it, it's true for you. Truth has nothing to do with beliefs. Objective truth has nothing to do with beliefs. If I don't believe it, it's not true for me. When people say things like, that's fine if God exists for you, but he doesn't for me, they are expressing the popular belief that truth is relative. Ah, nice, nice. The whole concept, I mean, I don't know. As Christians, of course, we understand and we know what the truth is. But just say you're not a Christian and you're just a general person out there. You know that God exists. You maybe don't know who God exists or how you can relate to God or why you're here or how things are put together or what the point is. But you know God exists. And at some point you do have morality. That is an objective fact. That isn't a relative. I believe in this and that and the other thing. It's like, no, morals exist because you have a concept. Even if you run by your own morality, even by you having your own morality, is morals existing. The whole concept of relative truth sounds tolerant and open-minded. Oh, we got to be open-minded. We got to let transvestites read to our kids in kindergarten, right? Well, we got to be open-minded. However, upon closer analysis, it is not open-minded at all. In essence, to say that God exists for you but not for me is to say that the other person's concept of God is wrong. It passes judgment. See, when you tell somebody they're wrong or objectively wrong or an idiot, as I like to do, call idiots idiots and heretics heretics, that's just passing judgment. Oh, now you have to prove that passing judgment is something that is objectively wrong. And they're going to say, well, that's relative. On some things, you shouldn't judge somebody on their color, right? You always say that. And then they're going to go into this stuff and how you feel about it and all that. And at the end of the day, they're going to call you a misogynist, racist, everything under the book, right? Anybody who has a sense of morality, right and wrong, and family values, you're a misogynist, racist, Trump supporter, right? Something like that. But no one really believes that all truth is relative. No sane person says gravity works for you but not for me, and then proceeds to jump off tall buildings to believing no harm will follow. Well, forget about the gravity thing, but I already mentioned the jumping off the building thing. So, when we're talking about truth, we're comparing apples and oranges here with someone's subjective ideas or someone's faith or someone's beliefs with objective truth. The statement truth is relative is, in fact, a self-refuting statement. Thank you. In saying truth is relative, one states a purported truth, but if all truth is relative, then the statement itself is relative as well, which means we can't trust it to be true all the time, which means it's BS. Certainly, there are some statements that are relative. Statements, sure. For example, my Ford Mustang is the coolest car ever made. Well, that's not a fact. It's a fact that you believe that, according to you, but you could be lying. Facts are things that are true for everybody all the time. That's what we're dealing with. And the only time anyone's going to have any gray areas is when you're talking about a moral issue that, some people, well, that's a kind of a gray area, this, that, and the other thing, with maybe some moral issues. Well, that show isn't that wicked. I mean, from time to time, it's all right. I mean, what are you going to do, right? It's making excuses, which is fine. Just don't call it, truth or not. You say, hey, that show's really wicked and depicts a lot of things you probably shouldn't be watching. You go, yeah, I know. I like the show, though, and that's what you do. You accept it as, yeah, it's probably not something I should be putting before my eyes, but, that's what you do. You be a big boy. And people that don't, otherwise you're just lying to yourself, right? And everybody is guilty of that, myself included, right? Everybody is guilty of stuff like that. Certainly, there are some statements that are relative for people, my Ford Mustang, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Generally speaking, opinions are relative. They all are. Many people relegate any question of God or religion to the realm of opinion. You think so? You think so? What Christians say and the Bible teaches is that truth is not relative, regardless of the subject matter. Correct. There is an objective spiritual reality, just as there is an objective physical reality. God is unchanging. Jesus likened his teachings to a solid, immovable rock. Jesus is the only way of salvation, and this is absolutely true for everyone, for every person, for all times. Just like the need for people to breathe in order to live, people need to be born again through faith in Christ to experience a spiritual life. Absolutely. So God got questions in the very last paragraph, had it right. And this is where I wanted to, this is why I'm doing this mainly over here instead of a different place, because I'm doing a lot of talking about the mind control that's going on. But what makes it so easy to call out heresy and find the cults and figure out where people are messed up and to know 100% that I am right and they are wrong is applying truth to what they are saying and logic to what they are saying. Okay, so the whole thing of work salvation, right, where it's like, no, you need to trust in Jesus to be saved, and that anyone who adds anything to that is false. You don't have to listen to anything more. At that point, they are a heretic. There is nothing to talk about. Nothing. Someone posted on one of my old videos today about, actually it was like a Robert Breaker one, so it was real old, about, how we could call Catholics lost and this and that. And it's like, because they believe in work salvation. They teach works among many other things, but it's like at that very basic, the gospel is as simple can get. Right? And at that very basic point, any deviation is a lie. Any deviation from what the Bible says is a lie, and it is not true. So it makes things very easy to call out heresy and heretics and all that stuff. Real simple. You cut right to the chase. What are the facts that people are riding on? What is what they're saying, and what is the ultimate? How does that conform to the mind of God? And makes it very, very easy. So yeah, that's Is Truth Relative by the Got Questions people. And now we have Got Questions on what is objective truth. And I'll take a look at chat here, and then we'll finish up with this article. Both on the same thing. It doesn't say who wrote this, so I'm hoping it's the same person, so we get the same kind of a spiel. Jack, how's it going? You gotta keep me in line. All right, that's all that's new. Jack's here. Jack's here. Gonna tell us all about truth. Objective truth. What is objective truth? If something is objective, it has correspondence with reality. What is reality? Objective, you see, I mean, that's the next logical question, right? That you have to answer, what is reality? And that's really the question when people talk about moral relativism and the truth being relative. You're talking about a relative morality or relative reality. You understand? Because everybody's reality is different. Well, there are all things that we all share in common, but we're all existing in a spiritual realm or existing in the world. Are you talking about the reality of physics and how the world is put together? Because we all do share that. If we're talking about the reality of why things happen a certain way, or why Bitcoin goes up in price or something like that, our views on that are going to be completely different. Objective truth is something that is true for everyone, whether they agree with it or not. At one time, it was simply called truth. When did that change? Remember back in the good old days? Back in the 80s with all the hairspray? We just called things true and we called things false. We didn't have this other stuff kind of in the middle. Remember that? You had true and false questions, and then they came out with these tests where too many people got them wrong or something. So we came out with the tests that were always true, mostly true, sometimes true, or not true at all. You know the test that I'm talking about. I remember the good old days when we just had yes or no, right? The objective is the opposite of subjective. So if a person says, right, we all know that subjective is opinion, right? Someone's given their subjective thoughts on something, it's their opinion. And if they're giving an objective thing, it's like, look, I am right, and right is right. It's not I am right about something, although that's what, narcissists like myself do. I told you so, right? No, it's not I am right. It's just right. I happen to be telling you that it's right, but me saying I am right or this is right, it doesn't have any bearing on if it's right or not. It's right because it's right. It stands on its own. I might just be bringing it forth and calling attention to the fact. So we're back to the same example. The 1966 Ford Mustang is the coolest car ever made. He is making a subjective statement. It is simply the opinion of one person. There is no way to measure that statement against reality. It cannot be evaluated as apart from the opinions of people. Now remember that when people make statements, right? And as soon as somebody puts on a white lab coat, they all of a sudden gain credibility and all this. And what I say all the time about deciphering articles and all of the fake CIA nonsense when you're looking around on Sludge Report or Yahoo News or all this stuff. Anytime you have scientists say, experts say, any no-name entity organization says something, it's totally false, right? There's no name attached to it. If it says Bob Johnson says this, okay, then Bob Johnson thinks that. Dr. Fauci says, okay, Dr. Fauci's CIA handlers think that, all right? But if it's unnamed, no-named, whatever the things, you can just throw it out. Still, it's, well, I guess they think that. Doesn't still make it true just because scientists say, experts say, the news says, Joe Biden says, or Corn Pop. Others will either support or oppose the statement depending solely on their own equally subjective opinions. Right, it's called a conversation. It's really impossible to say that a subjective statement is true in any meaningful sense. However, in a modern parlance, someone might say, it is my truth. This is something that idiot atheists would say. Idiot atheists do say what's true for you is not true for me and blah, 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 right? I mean, those guys, the atheists are so screwed up in the head that the New World Order doesn't want anything to do with them. You can't even get into the Freemasons. You can't get into any of them. All of the different little merry bands of men in goofy hats, you cannot get in there unless you believe in God. It doesn't matter what God you believe in, but you have to understand that God exists or you can't be trusted. You're too much of a liability and an idiot. Okay, so that is a very atheist statement. It is my truth, true for me. Which introduces a brand new spin on subjectivism. At one time, my truth would have been more accurately labeled my opinion. Right? An objective statement is factual. It has a definite correspondence to reality. What is reality? Is the next question. See, there's the real crux of why everything gets messed up. It's not that truth is relative or that things aren't black and white. It's that people are make-believing and living in their own reality. Whether it be sitting there watching television for 8 hours a day or playing a video game for 8 hours a day or whatever, they're living in their own realities. They're not playing in the same, everyone's not playing in the same little hamster ball, right? But truth is still truth. Independent of anyone's feelings or biases, if a person says, I own a Ford Mustang, he is making an objective statement. If that person owns such a car, then the statement is true. If the person does not own such a car, the statement is false. Now, with this, what they just said here, if a person owns such a car, the statement is true. Okay. If the person does not own such a car, the statement is false. And now where your moral relativist or your idiot atheist goes in there and goes, well, I bought it, but technically the bank owns it. And, I own it 3/4, and we're introducing all sorts of junk. What it's like to argue people who don't have a basis in morality and a basis in truth. The truth or falsehood of the claim does not depend on the subjective opinion. In recent years, there has been an attack on the very concept of objective truth. things that were once deemed to be objective have been labeled subjective. For instance, the statement God exists was, in the past, recognized as an objective statement. People might agree or disagree, but everyone can be considered an objective statement regarding external reality. Most people agreed with the statement, but even atheists who disagree treated it objectively. The statement was either true or false. And obviously, we know that God is real. And what's interesting is we switch from the objectively factual statement of God is real, God exists, and because 2% of the population that are communist and they all work in schools don't like God, they can tell all of their students that truth is relative and God existing is an opinion. And then when you say, well, where did everything come from then? Then they can go, 4.7 billion years ago, there was rain, and it rained on the lava and the rocks, and then a hamster jumped out of the lava and the rocks, and then we had a cow, and the cow turned into a whale, and then they on and on and on with the spiel, right? In more recent years, we have seen subjective opinion related to the level of objective truth. If a person embraces his truth or her truth, then everyone else is supposed to embrace that truth as well, at least in certain politically correct matters. Right? All of these little clubs that know that they're evil, that want everybody to accept them, and they try real hard, and they need parades, and they need funding, and they need people to donate, and they need everyone to, believe the way that they do. Well, why do they have to advertise for that? Do I have to advertise, I'm in a straight marriage? Do I have to advertise that I don't believe in murdering babies? Do I have to advertise? Do I have to get people together and do parades and all of these things about doing objectively moral good things? No. You have to get the marketing team spun up to do wicked things and being an evil person and pretending to people like this is normal. And this goes back into mind control thing of the generational cycles that people are put into, and the next generation gets the next mind control. And now the reason I'm always going to be rally on the boomers, okay, guys? I mean, I know some of you boomers out there, but if you're listening to me, you're bloomers. You're not boomers. But wildly regarded by everyone, not just me, as the most nihilist, narcissist, selfish group of generational people in that generation that's ever existed. And I don't want to go too far down that whole thing, but you take the reason. Now, here's where I'm at is forgive them. They know not what they do, okay? And here is the reason, and every generation's got their problems, including Gen X. Gen X wouldn't do much else either. We just didn't have any money. We got to be all messed up and be broke. But what happens with these generational cycles, and whether or not it's a planned deal, I don't think that the governments and these people are really that bright. But they definitely try and, train people up through the generations. And if everyone is brought up in this little box and everybody is trained the same way, you're just kind of looking around to make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. This is no different than when you start your first day at a job and you're working on the line and you're like, well, I think this is what I'm supposed to do, but I'm finishing way before everybody else. And I'm like, is everybody else doing the same? Did I do this right? I got to be missing something. All these guys, they're way behind. I'm already done, right? You look around. And you're judging yourself based on what other people are doing. And this is how the government screws you up. By keeping you trapped in these little institutions for 18 years. And this is what happens with the boomers. Whereas I don't know about how their morality got messed up. I don't know. But you look over here and you go, well, Bob's doing okay. As I'm keeping up with Bob, right? And then there's Jack over there. His life is I'm doing better than Jack. He's got some real problems. I'm no church boy pure as the Briven snow, but I'm not like Jack. And, I've got 2 Buicks and a boat. And if I got one more boat, I'll be up over next to him. And then, we're all doing good. Right. We're all doing what we're supposed to be doing. And that's how people are gauging their metrics. They're not going back to truth. They're not going back to objectively true moral things. People are judging their reality of how they think things are just with what other people are doing, and not to an actual right and wrong, truth, false standard. That is relativism, and that's moral relativism. And that's what's messed everybody up. And it's just, it happens to like all these empires. You know, it happened to Britain. Before that, you know, supposedly Rome. Who knows when any of that history stuff was going on? But that's the crux of it right there. And then you have Generation Z and millennial generation and stuff up here now that were given a completely different mind control programming stuff. So who knows how they're gauging their metrics on things. But they're probably not teaching them truth and logic in high school. I actually was taught that. I think my high school is like really good. I compare it to a lot of things. But yeah, the problem here is in the realities that people live in, right? And the reason that people were born in the 1945 to 65 era do not understand or relate or understand anyone else's problems or why people maybe have some not so kind things to say about them is because they don't understand. They grew up, and to them it was normal to work at a fruit stand and be able to buy a car, be able to buy a house, be able to get married and have 3 kids and just be working at the fruit stand on minimum wage. That was a possible thing for them. They don't know any different. Well, of course I went to school. Why wouldn't I go to school? You know, it was $2,800 to get a 4-year degree. And then they bought a house for $7,000, and that went up in value more than cryptocurrency does. And that was the same for the entire generation. So there's a complete disconnect going into Generation X, who was the latchkey guys who never really knew our parents and had to take care of ourselves. It's a total divide. Their reality is completely different than a Generation X guy like myself and my reality and how I associate to the world. But your objective truth and your objective falsehoods, they're still there. You can just retreat into your own little reality and say it's true for me and not true for you. It's like, no, when we all meet up outside the hamster bubble, there is objective truth. And all of the people get all caught up into their programming and not actually a part of objective reality, like, you know, things that are real and true. And you get people who write crazy articles like there's no such thing as truth, right? Reality has a way of encroaching on people's opinions. Try as they might, it is impossible for people to get away from the concept of objective truth. Yeah, the reason that people are so messed up in the head, and now this is where I was going with the mind control thing. Got a generation of people who were brought up basically when the government wasn't totally insane. Okay, and people have their idea. They weren't totally insane, and they could, by and large, they thought that they could kind of sort of maybe trust them. All right. And another generation who are like, what are you, crazy? So for one group of people, the government is there to help. And then for the other group of people, the government is there to hurt you. Well, you can objectively prove that. Okay. You can objectively prove. And it's like, depending on what metrics you look at, it doesn't look like the government's there to help so much. But if you're in a certain situations, then, you know, they give you $200 a month for food. They give you welfare. And it's like, is that helping you or is that hurting you? That's a whole different thing. But the real butting heads part is people's reality and people who don't want to live in reality. They want to live in a fantasy land. Person who says that a person can choose his own gender is, in fact, making an objective statement. The statement is either true or false. The person who makes the statement will not be satisfied until you agree that it is their truth. They will insist that it is an objective statement that is true for everyone. Even the statement the objective truth does not exist. is an objective statement. Right. Those who make it will often try to argue that it corresponds to reality and therefore is objectively true, thus defeating their own argument. Right. Anyone who disbelieves in objectively true fact statements and objectively false statements is a person who is living in the dreamland where they cannot make sense and rationalize truth. And this is why a lot of people, even though they know not to go out and go get gene therapy, and they know that, it's probably not good for you, and they know the government probably lies and all this stuff. They know. But if they actually faced that stuff, their brain couldn't handle it. Okay? The brain ain't going to handle it. With all this stuff going on, where you're told you got to get the jab. Once you get the jab, you don't have to wear the mask. And then they go out and get the jab, and then 2 weeks later, they're like, okay, you got to wear the mask, even if you got the jab, right? A person's mind would break if they're used to believing, if they put their trust in the government. They got to go off into fantasy land, make up their own reality. And the people that want to exist in their own reality, despite the facts out there, as particularly with what we've been going through for the last year and a half, the facts are so overwhelmingly out there with that nobody has any excuse, right? So that's why I said, be very careful if you tell anybody about, you may just suggest that, it's probably, you might want to look at, some people are getting hurt with them jabs. Just leave it at that. Because you'd break someone's little bubble, they're going to snap. They're going to snap at you like a wounded animal. And that's the problem. Postmodernism is a philosophical movement that does not deny the existence of objective truth, but it denies that we can never know it. Because it denies that we can ever know it for sure, because we are all swayed by various cultural forces that cloud our judgment. In a postmodern thinking, it is only ignorance and pride that allows one to say, I know this is true. However, when postmodernists say it is impossible to know anything for sure, they are making a factual statement. You see? And people do this all the time. Like I'll say, well, nobody knows anything, including myself. That statement really can't be true because nobody knows anything. And including myself, who also doesn't know anything. It's a total fallacy. But that's a little bit of a side point. If it is impossible to know anything for sure, then it is impossible for them to know that it is impossible. In short, facts and opinions are different. Well, thank you for clearing that up. Objective truth is the opposite of subjective opinion. People may argue over whether a particular statement is objective or subjective. If it is objective, they may argue over whether or not it is true, but no matter what, it is impossible to escape the fact objective truth does exist. At one time, the job for a Christian was to demonstrate the truthfulness of the biblical claims. Now his job has been made more difficult because, before talking about the truth of the Bible, the Christian must often convince the listener that the truth actually exists, especially in touching religious claims. And it has apparently always been this way, because what did Pilate ask? What is truth? Pilate, he's a government man, wasn't he? Yes, he was. Oh, what we got going over in chat here? Bacon toast, you're a middle-aged millennial? What is a middle-aged millennial? Was that like 30? No, millennial, you'd be like 25. Did I get it right? Jack's talking about boomer tendencies. Yeah, everyone's got boomer tendencies because we're Americans, right? We're American. And for people who don't know, I mean, boomer tendencies is buying stuff you don't need, being materialistic, being selfish, right? Being oblivious to everything but yourself, thinking you're the most important person on the planet, thinking you're entitled to things, that sort of thing. Also associating the country doing well, that you personally had a stake in that, like sending people to the moon, you personally did that, or the football team winning, that sort of a thing. It's a kind of a boomer tendency, and everybody has that. And the closer you are to that 19, like my brother was born in 67, and he's very Gen X, but he's also very boomer, right? He's on the cusp. And I think a lot of that happens is people get boomer tendencies. The more they're spoiled, you could say, and the more they succeed in life, where it becomes to a point where things don't really matter. You kind of disconnect from reality a bit and you live in your own little world. Or I know a person, relative of the family, who is very, he's the exact same age as me, very Gen X, and he was a little hellraiser. The family was all religious, at church every day, right? This person didn't like that. They smoked and drank and went out and partied and you know, failed out of high school or whatever. And but got a good trade job and had a good income, and they got married and they're taking care of dogs and kids and all this stuff, and always real bright, real logical, and didn't really care much for politics and getting involved in all this nonsense. But then, and he knows, and they know, like, getting gene therapy is probably not a good idea. But then as of late, because interest rates are really low and the housing market is really high, they sold their standard, you know, beginner house that they'd been in for a long time. And they got this big, huge thing for $350,000, $400,000, put up a 2,000 square foot garage. Big, it's a 3-acre lot. They had it fenced all in, and, you know, have their little oasis, and bought a brand new tractor and all these things. And doing stuff like that where it doesn't serve any utility really. It's just kind of nice stuff or whatever. And going severely into debt for all of it. And then after doing that a few months, it's like you find out the guy went and got the jab. And I'm like, but you know. You like know it's poison. And then they have excuses for it, like, well, I don't want to wear the mask at work, you know, and I don't want to do this, and I don't want to do that. I don't know, everybody else was doing it. And it's like, holy buckets. Is that what it is? Is that what it is? That whole buying way more than you could ever possibly need and consume and consume and consume, does that mess your head up that much where you just stop making rational decisions? I don't know. It'd be an interesting study to find out what the objective truth is behind that. But I was amazed. You know, I've never been, like, wealthy. I've had a lot of money before, but I don't spend much money, right? I don't just buy things just because I can. There are a lot of people that do. Where they're like, they get their paycheck, you know, and it's $700, and by the end of the day after getting their check, they're like $300 in debt. And then they still have some change in their pocket, and they're looking around for a gumball machine to put their quarters in. Oh, I still got money left in my pocket. I really needed some gum. Right? Consume, consume, consume. Yeah. Government demands obedience. Only a matter of time before they're demanding worship. Well, if you're obedient to the government, you are worshiping them. And I made this point before on another stream. I don't know if it was on this channel or not, but I said, you know, these people who have all these problems with their job now, right? I told everybody how to work these situations a year and a half ago. And if you had no plans for how to defeat this stuff back then, and it's been a year and a half, I'm not going to say anything about it now. Just how it is. But let's see. The funny thing about that is, if by even complying with any of the rules, any of this stuff, right? Like I have to wear a face shield at work. I'm fine. I honestly don't care about that. That's not in. People have to wear stupid hats. They have to wear a stupid vest. They got to wear a stupid whatever when they're doing their job. Fine, but you're not going to cover up my breathing hole. You're not going to cover my face. You're not going to do that, right? Now here's the thing. It's the equivalent of like, oh, if you want to work here, you got to shave your head, right? Something like that. If you want to work here, you got to dye your hair blonde. If you want to work here, you got to do this, you got to do this. No, not doing any of that. The very fact that people are doing it, though, shows that they worship the government because there is no laws. There is no laws about any of this stuff. Or they worship their job. Their job is becoming their identity, and that's just who they are. And people are so weak that they just don't know what they will do without their $10 an hour job at the Quickie Mart. That they'll get gene therapy and they'll go do whatever, or they'll put the slave mask on or whatever. And I'm going to break this down as I did on the other thing. If you're dating someone and you get married to them and everything is all fine, and the guy or the girl or the whoever, and there's no cooties around, there's no, this stuff cooties doesn't exist. And they said one day, you know what? You're gonna have to wear this mask now from now on when you go outside. I don't trust men and I don't trust you. You need to wear this mask. You would tell them to go F themselves. But the government comes in and tells you to do it, and you're like, yeah, all right, I guess I gotta do it. Does that make any sense? No. So you know who you worship. And people want to get mad at me about Bitcoin being a mark of the beast. It's like you're huffing and puffing on their mark. I don't know. Nick, you were the only person without a Muslim church? That's craziness. You know, I mean, I don't know. It depends on where you're at. I mean, it's good that the church didn't throw you out. So, I mean, that's fine. Honestly, as long as the church doesn't, I mean, I'm fine. People want to huff and puff on their mask. It allows me to say, "Oh, I don't have to talk to you." But, you know, if people want to wear it, it's a choice. You could go either way. Fine, whatever. Like I said, it's a great mark to show that people that are out of their minds and have mental illness, and you don't have to talk to them. This is the places like a church that want to enforce stuff like that. It's like basically saying they worship the government and they are an arm of the government. And I realize that there's a whole 501c3 thing that's part of that. But on your independent fundamental Baptist churches and your smaller churches, they don't have to be 501c3, and they could renounce their 501c3 at any time. And I don't think it would really matter. You know, obviously your Lutheran churches will never do that. If they're even 501c3 like the Roman Catholics. If you're a Roman Catholic and you work for those guys, they can do whatever they want. They're like they're a country. So I guess Roman Catholicism, that's none of them guys get in trouble. None of their little all the little pedophiles they have running around there, because the Roman Catholic stuff, they own that and they're a country. The Vatican is a country. So I would expect that anytime you go to their cathedrals or go to their places, it's like going onto the Indian territory, like the reservation, where they have different rules and different stuff. If you work for those guys, yeah, you got to huff and puff on your mask if that's what they say, but I don't think that they're doing that. But as far as regular churches, I wouldn't go to a church they want me to huff and puff on a mask. I bet their choir sounds kind of awkward. Yeah, singing praises to the Lord. So they are singing with the mask on. That's crazy. Josh Rubio, how you doing, man? I was just about to getting close to shutting her down. I read all my articles. We figured out, yeah, truth is definitely a thing. Objective truth exists. Nick says they're compliant with these awful directives, including the app thing. What is the app thing? Is there an... Oh, do you guys have the little app that says that someone's got Cooties next to you? Do you have a Cooties app? That'd be awesome. The Cooties app. Gotta catch them all. Good night, Josh. The last article that I had here, I'm probably not gonna read it, but it's by an angry atheist that says truth is not absolute. The uncertainty or non-absoluteness of truth value always involves some kind of confusion or ambiguity regarding the distinction between the sentential predicates of true and false. It's a guy who doesn't know at all what he's saying, so he's trying to put big words in there to sound smart. Where these predicates are often applied more specific predicate and its negotiation, e.g., if it's true, then the earth is round, and false, then the earth is... if it is true that the earth is round and false that the earth is not round. What? The confusion devolves into the contextual distinction between the lesser predicates in this round, not round context of the earth. See, these people have no idea what they're talking about. So I never believe the scientists and all these guys that say they know what they're talking about. It's like they're hiding behind gibberish. Gibberish. At least the psychologist admits that it's gibberish, even though he supports the idea that real truth doesn't exist. Nick says it's the app that's contact tracing. Right, so you got a Pokemon app. You got a Pokemon app that you run around and it beeps and you go, gotta catch them all. And you run after them and you go, you got Cooties. Right? Or it goes off if anyone's in contact with someone who tested for something. Yeah, it's funny. The truth, Frank, the truth is relative. People are the ones with the strongest opinions and swear up and down that you're wrong. Right. Because they're not, their truth is what they make up in their own heads. Exactly. Yeah, bacon toast, it's Cooties. I don't know how I have not been thrown off of YouTube yet. I honestly have no clue. Because I'm not really trying to curb much. I think it's a lot more fun to call it Cooties and gene therapy and getting muzzled. You know, I think it's more fun to do that anyway. But yeah, I haven't had anything as much as a strike. I had one video pulled down that was like 2 years old or something, talking about something completely different. I can't believe it. And I noticed that my actual metrics, they must be working so hard at stifling all these other YouTube channels and stifling people's comments and stifling everything. Stifle. And trying to rub all these people out that they forgot about me. Because I actually, like, they gave me my subscriber numbers, at least a couple hundred of them in like the last month. And it hadn't told me anybody subscribed. But I went from like 5,100 to 5,300 or something. Yeah, I don't know. I think their algorithm is working pretty hard. Nick, yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, we don't have the apps here yet. Oh, we probably do, but I don't think anyone uses them. Yeah, so anyways, that's what I got. Really, like I said, you know, the idea that absolute truth doesn't exist, the only people who say that are some pretty evil people with no morality. Or, you know, young people who are told that by somebody else. But everybody knows that absolute truth exists. People want to argue it and play it back and forth because maybe it's part of their job. It really allows you to skate questions and play politics, and virtue signal if you don't accept the fact that there is a right and a wrong. Once upon a time, not very long ago, particularly things about people who want to be transgender, this and that, no one really ever had a problem. I mean, transgender people acting that way have existed forever. Literally forever. And actually in the 80s, there were a lot of movies that had stuff like that in it. You know, where, you know, some guy is picking up on what he thinks is a girl, right, or something. It was a very common trope. So it's not like people aren't exposed to it. But in nowadays, it's, well, we have to dress up in drag and read to the children, as everybody knows that. It was a political thing or whatever. Or we have to do something else and really rub it in people's faces. And it's like, well, it has nothing to do with whatever the transgender thing. It's just not, it's not something that is right for children, right? Just like you wouldn't want two straight people, a dude in a bikini thong and his girlfriend with body paint reading to the kids and stuff. And hey, celebrate us in our freedom as a nudist, right? And it's objectively wrong. Objectively wrong. But again, the people that want to bend that stuff are the ones, it's not necessarily always up to, they're the people that are fighting God and mad at God, or they're people that are engaged in wickedness and evil, like doctors. Oh yeah, well, you know, abortion is a simple medical procedure, and it, you know, sometimes it helps the mother, and blah blah blah. It's murdering babies. Oh yeah, well, you know, people have to adjust that, because if they actually confronted it, their brains would pop. That's what we have it. And again, the problem is the people's relative nature of their own reality, not truth. Truth is the same for everybody. But it's the reality that people live in. And man, people live in some really messed up, especially with all the drugs, the prescription drugs out there, the fluoride in the waters, just the drugs that people naturally do, and all the depressed Gen Xers that are out there, you know, out at the bars and everything else. And I was watching, I don't know if anyone has heard of her. Now I can't think of her name for some reason. Anyways, I will. She's a holistic doctor I've been watching for quite a while. I bought one of her books, and I had a little fight with her about, you know, she was kind of a, I don't know if she was a moral relativist, but she wasn't a God person. She was kind of a, I don't know if she was quite really a witch, but she was very kind of an atheistic sort of, because most doctors would be. Amanda Vollmer, that's who it is. And she was staying very, now I forgot what my whole point was. Just talking about what people want to believe in, people's expectations and their little reality bubbles, where a person's reality is you've got all of these things that say that, hey, this is not good for you to do. This is not, you know, not good for you to do. And people go out and do it anyway. And then when they get hurt, then they expect sympathy, and people give them sympathy. And it's like, when did that start happening? When did that start happening? People started doing that. But anyways, Vollmer and her natural health stuff talks about all of the different detoxification things that people have to go through, because it's almost impossible to think straight with all the crap that most people are into. And people just like lying to themselves. And it's like, yeah, you know, it's probably not healthy to be 50 pounds overweight, you know, and McDonald's is not a healthy, balanced meal. And, you know, you probably don't need to drink a 12-pack of beer every day and that kind of thing, you know. And Oh, I was there and then I lost it. Oh, that sucks. I'm going to remember it like after I'm done with the stream. Oh. It goes back to the Vax Pass things. Is that people are into, people don't see any problem with, for instance, America is just like crazy, crazy fat. And, but when you're watching television and modern movies, there's always fat people in them. So it's normalized, and you've got Victoria's Secret where it's like, oh yeah, fat is beautiful. It's like, no, it's fat. It's unhealthy, right? But because people are programmed and that's their normal, right? That's their normal bubble. Oh, that's my normal bubble. And the idea with the you got to get your pass, that people need to get their cootie pass, and they got to wear their muzzle and get their cootie pass so that they can go out and go to the bar, or they can go out to eat, or you can go out and go to the concert, right? And it's like that is the system. And all of that stuff is not reality. All of that stuff is manufactured by the world, right? And you have people that will give up all of their freedoms to go be a part of the system, the slave system, that feeds them nothing but junk food that makes them overweight and makes them feel like crap, and tells them that, oh, that's sexy and gorgeous. And then they go off to get programmed in a movie. They have their past that they're giving up all their freedom for so they could go to a movie and get programmed with nonsense, right? Go to a rock concert and get some drugs, or go to the bar on Friday nights so you can hang out and watch the sporting events that are brought to you by the government, and to take part in their little entertainment. And it's like, if you look at it like that, it's pretty easy solution is just to, well, if I have to stay at home, then I guess I got to stay at home. I mean, gonna get rid of all of my rights so you can go to the bar? Get rid of all your rights so you can go to a restaurant that's going to feed you GMO garbage? Yeah, Frank. That's what happens. I get running into 3 or 4 different topics. I actually was going to talk about um, on the other channel. I was going to talk about the importance of, as we have our uncertain times to come, and we're working about what's going to happen with the supply chains. And I've been saying, the cost of food is going up by 15-20%. That's an objective fact. You can get that information from everywhere. I verify it because that's what I do, right? And we're talking about real food, okay? We're talking real food. We're talking apples, we're talking bananas, and meat especially, right? Everything is going up. Other products are also going up because of supply chain problems, things coming from China. But the main concern here is food, right? Because what I have noticed, and one thing that I had been saying since last year, and I think a few other people at the time who called it out pretty early had mentioned this too, where people are worried about famines and not having any food at the grocery store, and all of this stuff. People are going to be starving and all this. And it's like, no, you're not going to be starving. The real food will be scarce, and it will cost you too much to actually get. But the junk food will still be there because that's all that's in the grocery store. Like 3/4 of the grocery store is nothing but corn syrup and cornstarch and MSG and absolute trash. And you know what? I've been paying attention to that as to the prices. I probably do 1,000 prices in a week, something like that. And I've actually lowered the price on maybe 2 dozen things since the last month. Those things, the things that are coming, like an entire category, like ice cream and like chips, entire categories by a manufacturer will get lowered. They're the only things that are getting lowered. And it's the junk food. Okay? So keep an eye out. The people, if they don't have any restraint and they're not in shape and they're not aware of trying to eat good food, you're really going to wreck your health, because you're going to be like, well, I eat better, but it's too expensive to buy a steak. It's like, maybe that's by design. I don't know. But it's always been the thing that there's always going to be plenty of food in America, but it's all going to be garbage, right? The lettuce is too pricey. The steak is too pricey. I haven't bought chicken in a month. Okay, I've only been able to buy the frozen. We have an air fryer, so I buy the frozen chicken wing things or whatever. But I haven't been able to buy real chicken in a month. And the chicken factory is 30 miles from where I live. Golden Plump. They have a facility right here. It's been too expensive to buy. Or if I wanted to buy it, it's not even on the shelf. And I'm 30 miles away from the plant. So, just to be aware that, it's really hard to stay on top of things and to stay healthy and all of that stuff if you're eating garbage all the time. You get the brain fog going, you don't want to do anything, and it's not healthy times. And guess what, guys? You don't want to go to the doctor for anything. You don't want to go to the doctor for anything. You already know they're just going to give you pills. So be wary. I don't know what it's like in other countries. You guys are Australia and Canada and all this stuff. I'm saying in America, prices on real food are going up 20%. The fake crap is going down in price. Right? So try to eat good or try to fast. I've been blessed in that I don't actually have to eat that much, and I'm fine being hungry. So even if I eat junk food, it's like, if I only eat like once a day, then we'll call her good. I don't want to gorge on that stuff though. But I'm by no means a food Puritan. No means. I have my peanut butter and chocolate chip sandwiches, and we got ice cream in the freezer and all that. Oh yeah, my ready-made chicken wings, which actually aren't that bad. Absolutely, but you gotta watch out for the stuff more now than ever, because beyond just the fact that like your Cheetos are coming down in price and everything else is raising, they're gonna have to start swapping out ingredients that they use just because of supply chain issues and because of the cost of the ingredients. So just because you read the box 2 years ago and you've always been buying the same product, you kind of got to double check it, because you might be just saying, and that's an opinion. I don't have any fact for that, but it is factual. Food's going up, and the junk food miraculously is coming down a little bit, and so that's apparently what we're all going to eat. Nick says you have to keep an eye on food prices. Well, Nick, here's how it is. And nobody would really recognize that food prices are going up. And here is why. This is the scam. This is the way that they do it. And they're going to do it. Every single super mega conglomerate like Cub Foods, Colborn's, and Cashwise, and whatever, Winn-Dixie, Food Lion, all of these guys with central distributors, they all do it like this. You've got a can of soup. It's a really good soup, man. It's, $2.99 regular price. And then it's always on sale. It never comes off sale, right? So you got your little tag on there that says it's regularly $2.99 and we're going to give it to you for $2.69. You got your little flyer tag. It says it's $2.99. It's $2.69. And for as far as you know, it's always been $2.69 because it never comes off sale. Well, then a guy like me comes around and he sees that tag and he pulls that tag and he says, well, it was $2.99. Now it's $3.29. Okay. So I put a new tag on it that says it's $3.29 now, but it's still on sale for $2.69. See, so I raised the price, but the sale price is still the same. I've done that twice in a week on some items, like the very same exact item. Sometimes you go there and they raise both prices where the sale price also is less off or whatever. But typically the price for sale price stays the same. So when you go shopping, you might only notice a little bit of a difference because until they pull that sale sticker off, you're not going to see it. And for whatever reason, there's a variety of reasons they do that. If something is remarkably on sale, where they raise the price, from $5 to $8.99. And then I come along and put a tag on it and it's still on sale for the same, $2 or something. It's half off or whatever it is. They want to clear it out because the next shipment that comes in, they're going to adjust the size of the package, called shrinkage. They're going to adjust the size of the package so that they can have it at that price for that cost. And that's how they're doing it. And we're not even really in the supply crunch yet. The reason the prices are going up has largely to do with inflation. But chicken in my neck of the woods ain't happening. So yeah, we're seeing stuff. Anyways, guys, it's been 2 hours. I hope I didn't ramble too much with this stuff. I actually just kind of thought about this and thought I'd throw a poll up and thought that, yeah, people don't get truth. And it's not surprising. It's not surprising because there's a war on absolute truth, just like there's a war on God. Nobody wants anyone to know what's going on because if they were grounded on their flat plane, their flat stationary plane, then they're harder to manipulate and bamboozle. We don't want to be that. Nick shops at Whole Foods. Yeah, you know what, Nick? I'll just end a close on this. Is like there's a lot of reasons that people don't like Amazon and Jeff Bezos and all that. Jeff Bezos, when it comes to Whole Foods, has been a better caretaker of Whole Foods than the people who started Whole Foods. Jeff Bezos, when he took over Whole Foods, he said there's not going to be any more GMO in my Whole Foods. Okay. Alex Jones exposed that with the previous owners of Whole Foods were like, well, we don't know what's got GMO in it, so I don't know how we could possibly ever know that. It's like you're called Whole Foods. It says natural foods on the outside. Bezos took over and Whole Foods is like it's not all organic, but it's no GMO, like cornstarch is one GMO cornstarch in any other products or anything like that. So Whole Foods is a great place to be. All right. Good night, Frank, Bacon Toast, Nick. Jack already took off. And anyone else who has not commented who might be watching, take care, take it easy, be safe. Don't get bamboozled. Absolute truth is real. Don't let anyone try and say that it isn't. Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. Every man's a liar. With that, guys, we will be